Hey family, it's your girl Nathalie Nelson Parker here, and we are live with Nuggets with Nathalie, a special anniversary shortened edition. But we love you so much. I wasn't gonna not do Nuggets with Nathalie. No, because I promised you that we'll be talking about diversity, inclusion, and equity all month long. And this week we have a special guest. How can I introduce you? Let me see. She is the leader of leaders. She
Oh,
is Christianity and virtue personified. She is a businesswoman and an entrepreneur. I mean, you are like just you're the truth. You're the real deal.
oh,
And
appreciate.
I'm so glad that I know you. It is. Matter of fact, let you introduce yourself. How about that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. I am Lara Falusi, and as Nathalie alluded to, I wear many hats. I work full time in corporate America, in finance and strategy, and then I also, on the side, I run a business. It is called CEO of My Life. I like to think of it as a lifestyle brand for people who are serious about their faith and hustle, which is actually what one of my t-shirts says, the t-shirt that I'm wearing right now. We have inspirational t-shirts as well as other products, and a banging Instagram. So definitely follow us.
Awesome. Shout out to Summer who's watching. If you're watching, let us know where you're watching from. We're going to be talking about a really important topic. Last week was uh, basically pay women what they're worth, give women equal rights and equal pay. And so we wanted to continue that discussion and talk a little bit about when we're talking specifically about women who are executive leaders as well as entrepreneurs. So, can you talk a little bit, Lara? Like you say, you are in both of those worlds, kind of how you got there and what you've gleaned from those experiences.
Yes. So I've been in the corporate world for about 15 years now. So it's been a minute, despite, what my youthful face might say. And what I can say about that experience is that there are so many challenges. It's so complicated being a Black woman in that space. Now, I think for good or for bad, um, people always notice you,
Mm,
but I don't know if people always acknowledge you. Um,
mm,
and that would be the way that I would sum up my experience in corporate America is that, oftentimes a lot of the sisters that I encounter, they're really, seen as that go to and the fixer and that behind the scenes facilitator type person. Oh, Nathalie, work your magic. However, when it's time to be center stage, oftentimes you don't see us. And
mm-hmm,
so I think that that's part of the challenge because when you're not in those center stage roles, well, then you're not going to get paid.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, and I do think that that's why we see, Black women being that, largest growing demographic in entrepreneurship, but also, sidepreneurship, which is, having something on the side. Because I think in the corporate world, a lot of women may not necessarily have as much space to lead in a way that, fully realizes their potential.
I love that. And that's such an interesting position to be in. And you and I have talked about this because we're both kind of sidepreneurs. I like that. uh, and we've talked about like how those roles sometimes are so different. That how you are as an entrepreneur is so different than what it's like on your job. Can you talk a little bit about a female that's a lady that's a boss out there that's vacillating between those two worlds?
It is very, very challenging because I do think, starting with entrepreneurship, the whole point of being an entrepreneur is you have to have this bias for action. So you have to be very decisive, very final. very pointed and very clear in what it is that your vision is, and how you're going to execute against it. I do think, some of those qualities transfer over to corporate, but the way organizations are structured now, a lot of organizations are matrixed. There's, blurring of responsibilities and functional lines and things like that. So I do think that, being someone who um, is very results focused, sometimes it can, be a little bit of a detriment, because in, the company world or the corporate world and organizations, you have to be more people focused, not just focused on the decision, but, how the decision is made makes a lot of difference. It's not just about, the ends justifying the means. It's, how you make the decisions, how you involve people, and how you're perceived, which
Mm.
you don't necessarily have control over how someone chooses to receive you. There are, some things that you can do, but you don't necessarily have control over that. So it's a little bit different in that way.
Yeah. So how do you and yourself kind of reconcile that? So, and maybe there's someone out there that's like, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur, or or I'm in corporate and I want to be an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
but I don't know how to make that shift.
Whew, okay. Well, this, if I were to do a PhD, this probably would be my dissertation topic. But I'm figuring it out now. I'm doing, the primary research right now. Um, I think the advice that I would give is, it requires really working on your emotional intelligence.
Mm.
Um, it also requires putting aside ego at times, because it's like, I think in the corporate world, sometimes what you have to realize is that it's not always valuable to be right. Um, you know what I mean? Because it's like there's a hierarchy. And depending on your organization, you need to be mindful of who has power, who has influence, and who has authority, which may not necessarily all be the same person. Um, and so I think the relationship building, the emotional intelligence, that really comes into play, because otherwise you will have a lot of blind spots, because whether you like it or not, I think in that environment it does matter who likes you. In the real world, you can kind of compartmentalize things, and when you're a business, you kind of decide who your target market is, and you kind of focus in that lane, but it's not the same in the corporate world.
And that's so funny because I was talking to a friend about emotional intelligence, and she was saying there's that concept is so loaded for an African American woman
Oh,
because there's there's so many different like power structures and silos just within the way society is created. And not saying that there's no way to thrive in that or to overcome those challenges. But in your experience, what are some practical tips and tools that a female boss, whether she's in the corporate sector or whether she's an entrepreneur, can thrive and can do well and take care of yourself or keep your skin moisturized and your edges laid? Like, what are what are some practical tips
yeah.
that you would share for those women who are leading?
Yes. So, as far as practical tips, so for me, I'm faith based. So, everything kind of goes back to God. Now, your audience is probably faith based, knowing you. Um, but whatever it is that really grounds and centers you, I think it's very important to stay connected to that, to stay connected to that sense of purpose. Because when you are connected to that, then your source of validation is more likely to be internal than external. And so when these ups and downs happen, whether it's in the corporate world or the entrepreneurial world, it's a little bit easier, though not easy, to
Mm,
maintain.
mm,
So that's one tip. Another tip that I would offer, and this applies to both worlds, is that you need a mentor, but you also need peers. And you also need to be able to reach back and help somebody,
Oh,
because
that's good.
they learn. We learn from somebody, right? From being taught. We also learn through doing, which is kind of why you need those peer relationships. Well, you also learn from reaching back behind and teaching it. And at the point you can teach it, that's when you've really learned it because it's sunk in, right?
Mm,
So I think that that's very important to always think about how you're managing your time and your relationships, because a lot of people are solely focused on, the mentor part, or the peer part, or being a mentor to others, but you really need all three.
right. So, do you think those three should happen simultaneously at the same time as you're being mentored, have a mentee, as you are build alongside others?
To be honest, I tend to think so. Now, I would say that, is it going to be, even all the time? Not necessarily. There might be seasons of your life where you acquire a little bit more mentorship, particularly earlier on
Mm,
in your career or entrepreneurial journey. You might be leaning very, hard on that mentorship. Um,
mhm,
I do think that it definitely is beneficial to have, peers um, at any stage of the journey, peers that you trust, just to have, a sounding board, because we all think different ways. And you can benefit from somebody else's perspective. And then also sometimes you just need to talk to somebody who's also in that same boat. Um, because particularly entrepreneurship, but also leadership. Leadership can be lonely,
mhm,
because different people have different goals. Your friends who are more of your social friends, they might not connect to those goals, or your family. Some of them might connect, some might not. So it's important to have people in that peer set that are sharing similar experiences too. As far as mentoring others, I think it's all relative, right? When I was early in my career, that mentorship might have been, high school students, right? So
mhm.
people who you mentor or who you gravitate towards sharing your knowledge with, it might just change based on the season that you're in.
I love that. So, what do you say, since you are in corporate and kind of have a close proximity to those corporations, organizations that are interested in being more equitable, more just, more inclusive? What are some, let's say, just three immediate steps that an organization needs to take, particularly when it comes to gender equality?
Well, first they can pay Black women their market
In the
rate.
name of Jesus.
It's very, it's very cool. So, so I've worked for pretty much exclusively large corporations. They always have, a diversity and inclusion officer in office. And yes, I understand that their hearts are in the right place, but it's 2020. It's just time to be about that action. Like, I understand that we are forming these committees, to talk about issues, which is great, but these issues have been around since 1619, and probably before that. So, as a Black woman, I'm past the point of like wanting to just talk about it. What are some of the things that we are doing as organizations to fix it? So, you can pay Black women and Black men and other people of color, and other women what they're worth. You can create a formal sponsorship program where those
Mm,
are in power, who in corporate organizations tend to be white males over 50, are invested in advancing the career of those who do not look like them, because typically what happens is that people sponsor who looks like them. So if the people at the top don't look like me, then guess what, I'm not getting sponsored. um,
mm,
Happens, and I'm not saying that it's malice. It's just people tend to connect with
right,
like.
right.
Um, And so putting, formal sponsorship programs in place is key. And then also holding people accountable, because I do think we can mean well, but without accountability, there's no change. Just like, I could mean to, lose 20 pounds, but without changing my diet, like there's no weight loss.
Right.
So, I mean, it's like these things get very complicated because I do think folks try to boil the ocean, or folks attach themselves to, whatever is in the media or whatever seems quote unquote hot. And it's like, I love that you posted about this on social media, but let's evaluate the things in our own, companies and organizations, whether that's schools or other types of organizations, um, that we can do to dismantle some of these inequities.
Mm, I love that. And you're so humble. I'm in corporate, I'm an entrepreneur, but you're really like playing, you're not even saying like how dope your brand is, how many followers,
Oh,
like people who just, and I'm one of them. I love the brand. I repost, buy all the merch. Can you talk a little bit for that lady boss out there who is thinking about being an entrepreneur or is an entrepreneur and like ready to give up because it's so much work? Can you share your testimony of why you became an entrepreneur and what that journey's been like, and the success as well as some of the uh, trying parts of the journey?
okay, yes, absolutely. So, I've always been that person that had a lot of ideas, but I was light on the execution, especially when it came to entrepreneurship, because it's like you get on this path, you go to a good school, you go to a good master's program, you go to a good company, and it's just safe and comfortable, right? So, what incentive is there to do anything different, or to take that risk and put yourself out there? Unfortunately, last summer I had, my family had a life changing experience, which, my mom, she lost both of her legs, and now lives with disability. And, while that was very hard and it's something that's painful to live with, it's a pain that sticks with you. Um, I also found a lot of hope in her recovery journey, and just the fact that her mindset and her faith just got her through. And it's through willing herself to get better that I genuinely believe that she got better, and continues to get stronger. And, when you go through something like that, it really teaches you or shows you not to take anything for granted, because tomorrow is not promised. So it created an urgency within me to just get out there and try it. Because, like, well, I always kind of had this thing like, well, I have to leave my job to try entrepreneurship. And it's just like, that's so unrealistic. That's what people tell themselves so that they never, pursue their dream. Like, oh, I'm not going to do it unless I do it full time. Like, no, most people start off not doing it full time. And so, that's what kind of led me to start. Now, to your question about sticking with it, it's a long game. It's a game that's about consistency. So a lot of people think that, um, oh, I just got to go viral and then that's it. And, to be honest, a lot of the times, the people who we think are overnight successes, when you take a closer look, they like it's not their first business, or they've been at it for a while, or maybe they tried it 5 years ago and that wasn't the time and then they tried it again. So that's I say that to say that you your journey is going to be unique. I say that to say expect some ups and downs, but you will never be successful if you quit. The only way to be successful is to try, to learn from your failures, and keep going. That's it. That's
Awesome. That's the truth. And what have been some of your successes? And just, just share, like, how long has your
Oh,
brand
right.
been?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started this time last year. I opened
Just 1 year.
my online boutique. It'll be a year on August 31st. Um, and there's definitely been ups and downs because with the retail business, I started my business at a time that is typically a busy time for retail. Once
Hmm.
you get to September, people are like ka-ching, 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 like shop till you drop. Maybe it's because people like can't go outside, but I mean we can't go outside. And but I'm just saying, like people just
Hmm.
shop. And then, with COVID, there was a period where the whole apparel supply chain was like, it was a mess. It, like, there was a point in time, even like really, famous and well-known brands, they were going and having IG lives like, yeah, I'm sorry, like that it's taking 5 weeks to get your packages, but that's just what's going on right now. It was crazy. So I made a conscious decision not to like really promote or really advertise in the months of like, I would say April, May. And that's coming off the high of like the holidays in the first quarter of the year. And then now, now I'm like getting back into it and things like I feel like really positioned to continue to like learn and grow. Um,
Hmm.
and just feel inspired to keep going. So I'm glad that like during that lull, it gave me an opportunity to rethink certain things in my business. I didn't necessarily, I felt discouraged at times, but I knew it was kind of like just the season that I was in. Um,
Hmm.
everyone was in, and there was something to be learned from that time frame. And I think oftentimes as entrepreneurs, or anything, we're always focused on like that immediate result, but some results are just slow cooked, and it's not like a microwave type situation.
Yeah, I love that. And you and I talk a lot about our systems. Like, okay, it's good to have a great product. It's good to have a wonderful idea. But especially if you're a sidepreneur or solopreneur, like those systems that you put in place are really important for your customers to have a good experience, for your um, processing, like whatever it is that your particular uh, um, service or product is. Those back end systems are so important.
They are so important.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about, and this is going to be the last question for you. You talked a little bit about like the pandemic, but
Ooh,
how are you kind of adapting, whether it's your systems, your customer service, like how are you adapting and being flexible in this new season because it is new?
new. And, I think this is one of the things where being in corporate for so long, as well as being in, specifically, before I got to my most recent role, I was in a consulting type role and client service has taught me, which is the value of over communication. So when
Mm.
somebody, places an order on my site, they probably are sick of the amount of emails that they get, but I want them to make sure, like, I want to make sure that they have all the information that they need about their order because that builds trust. You know,
Mm.
not just about like, oh, boom, here's an email. Thank you for ordering. No, I like to send a more personal note with something inspirational because my brain is inspirational. Not just like, oh, well, thanks for buying from me. See you later. No, like, thanks for supporting me. I want you to do well. And so I have a whole like follow up, email sequence through that time from when they purchase to when they get their order. And, when the shipping information is available, boom, it just goes to them. So they have it. It's very clear how to get in contact with me. You know what I mean? I make that clear and accessible because it's really, especially with the online business, it's really about establishing that trust. So having a system like that is extremely helpful.
And it's so amazing when we going back to the systems that you automate that as much as possible so that you're not stressing yourself out trying to track packages and going back and sending emails.
And
And at the same time, like you said, your client or your customer has that great experience and makes that connection with you. And I would say, as because I am a client and a supporter, that that personal connection piece that you make is so like it's so personal. Like this is me, and this is why I created this brand, and this is my mom, and like that that is so unique that a lot of companies and businesses don't take that next step. So I would say I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think that that's the thing with small businesses where you definitely have to use that because a lot of times people are supporting small businesses intentionally, right?
Mhm.
Because they want that personalization, right? People could easily go to Amazon and like get a t-shirt or whatever, right? But they're buying, from a small business to support somebody else's dream. So it's like, well, let me let them know that, I'm also supportive of their dreams and, I want them to do well, which is kind of why I created this brand.
I love this. So this is the final nugget of the night. So this is where you can share and speak directly to the audience and give them your final nugget about executive leadership, as well as being a lady boss.
Yes, absolutely. So my final nugget of the night would be that your journey is a journey. So learn to embrace the process. Along the way, there will be highs, there'll be lows, there'll be ups, there'll be downs. But as you're going through your journey, always focus on what it is that you could be learning through the process because you never know your journey and what you learn from it can really make someone else's life easier. And for that, the struggles will always be worth it.
I love it. Thank you so much, Lara. Listen, let us know that you enjoyed. Like, share, comment, tag a friend. If you have questions, go ahead, drop them. We're always going to come back. Well, that's it. That's all. Since the clock on the wall, you go ahead and make the world great because guess what, world changer? Transformation starts with you.
Happy anniversary again, too.
Thank you. Bye. I got to go have a happy hour after party.
All right. All right.